It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to meet a number of the Gulf Coast poets who are actively engaged in the craft and are hosting the event tonight. I did have the pleasure of, when I moved to Brownsville with my wife Joan in 1985, of finding that one of the members of the faculty at Texas Southmost College, where I started, was Virginia Cowan, a wonderful teacher and enthusiast of literature. And so I know other sons in the Cowan family, but it's a pleasure to meet David tonight. We've got a lot of grackles in South Texas. A lot of people hate grackles. I suppose they're nuisance birds, and if I were a farmer, I probably would hate grackles too, but I'm not a farmer. And actually, I find them interesting to look at, listen to, and they are striking birds. This is a poem that I wrote and dedicated to a friend of mine down there who enjoys doing some birding and so forth. We used to talk about birds a lot. And the poem is called Man Who Lives Among Birds. This is for Jose Marcelo Garza, who has been one of my colleagues in teaching literature and composition for many years. And the poem goes like this. Friend, when great-tailed grackles float down and strut around my yard, eyes imperious, a flicker, I think of you at your house, still by window or porch, the wet birds preening among the sprinkler heads, their glint of midnight blue sparking your day. In class, after you've read a poem by Frost or Dickinson, a bird stands fixed against the page, and no one knows what sound it makes or where it would be going, could it go at all. Then someone sees a word begin to flutter, a line begin to rise, a black shape in search of itself, its eye on fire, its beak searing all sense as it shatters a window and speeds into the dark that waits outside. Thank you. Here's another poem that's set in South Texas, and I've got a reference in here to Walt. Thinking of Walt Whitman, who's I admire his work very much. Also admire Emily Dickinson's work very much. I think of him as a grandmother and grandfather of modern American poetry. Two wonderful 19th century American writers. Very different in so many ways. Their poetic styles are just remarkably different, but both of them had genius in their work. This is called Kingdom on Earth. The ducks are lined up along the Resaca, their quacks as crisp as the light that lures them into motion. Their waddle in cahoots with the colors and sounds that surround us, awash in the slow flood of living. What can we say about what it means to stretch our skin around the day when each pore holds all the water? Walt, you were windy, but you knew, harbored by the streets that scuff the leather of your heart, how light against a window could give a room its sanctity, there in the noise of the men who were testifying. Among my most recent poems over the past maybe year and a half, I've got a group that are kind of unusual. They're based on some family history, and it happens that my father, who grew up in West Texas, had a twin, and whose name was Carol. My dad's name was Charles, and Carol died at about 6 months of age, and so my father really never knew anything about his twin, and of course we grew up without having that uncle. But but he actually, he was an uncle of mine, but he only lived to be 6 months old. So it's sort of a strange circumstance. But I was reflecting one day about that and sort of wondering what he might be thinking if he could think about all of this, having lived such a short time, and as compared to my father's rather long life. And so I've got a series of poems. I'll read 3 or 4 of them from the series, and they're in Uncle Carol's voice. The series is called Uncle Carol Speaks, and I'll read the head note. Uncle Carol was born on July 13th, 1919, and died, 4 months later. It's not 6. 4 months later, on November 15th, 1919. His twin, Charles, died 91 years later on March 13th, 2011. This is called At the Sherwood Cemetery. They were both born in Sherwood, Texas, which is about, I think, maybe 20, 25 miles west of San Angelo. And if you look it up today on Wikipedia, the entry says it's a ghost town. There actually are some people living around, maybe, 70 or 80 folks in the area, but I mean, as far as being a town, it's really not an active one. There is a courthouse there, which is interesting. It was the county seat of that county back at the turn of the last century, but not many are there now. At any rate, this poem, there's a cemetery there, and this is called At the Sherwood Cemetery. So you've come to this graveyard to find a headstone with my name chiseled out. Listen to the windmill inside the entrance, creaking and groaning all day and night, and you'll likely learn as much as you will by walking up and down these rows, though there are other Damerons about, and even a section of Millses, my mother's people. I should have been buried here back then. Chilly day in November, small cheap casket, some flowers, a couple of dozen relatives, but where exactly is anybody's guess? See those flat chipped stones with rocks a body's length away, or long arms? Lots of these dead are lost to language now. The wind, their only inscription. Maybe you can hear my name if you listen closely, but you'll never ever know where my small bones lie, forever apart from my twin brother, buried 90 years later with a fine bronze marker in big D, so people won't forget him like they have me. As I mentioned earlier, I did have a career teaching literature and composition to students who had some interest or little interest in both of those subjects. And so, language, and of course, again, I've been writing poems for a long time. Language is something that we all are involved with, and so one day I ended up with this poem, which is about language, and it's called Place of Alphabets. Who knows how we came to be awake in this place of alphabets, where the T's provide a bit of shade and the R's all rush downhill, searching for an S and a promise of plurality. Close your eyes and listen to the clock deep in your vowels, where tick and tock tell it all. The air is for stringing a song, the wind is for twisting it around the contours of our lives, where we sort through the endless cackle of consonants. The other side of the coin, so to speak, is the world of mathematics, which is another human construct that helps us most of the time function in this world as we're trying to get places and understand things that have mathematical dimensions to them. And so I came up with this poem in reflection. It's called Mathematics of Meaning. He got so caught in his tangle of angles that he couldn't keep from growing more obtuse as he spoke in circles about triangles and every hypotenuse in the room missed his point. And I'll read one more poem before turning the podium over to my friend Larry. And this one is called Buzzards. Wrote this a few years back.
That's fitting.
Yeah, that's right. I'll leave the buzzards for Larry. No, the poem goes like this. You'd think at 50 I might know something about the way a car engine works, or might want to know gas and sparking, pistons, compression, the guy thing, or Piercig's balance between cruising and carburation. I tried to tune my Beetle years ago, pull at the belts, follow electrical wires. It didn't take. One of my college students tells me he hates poems. He can't make them make sense. I tell him he'll have to read poems to pass this course and get a degree. Maybe he can learn how to get behind the wheel, start the poem up, and find an image that can take him on down the road, leaving the buzzards to spiral along the refried roads, waiting for heat strokes or road kills, shimmering with symbolism. Thank you very much.
Thank you.